depending on the timbre of your voice. So some preliminary remarks. I obviously was not aware that the president was going to turn this year's honors award into a thematic one. It's a, well, let's say maybe it's a happy coincidence that I had received, well, it wasn't a coincidence. It should have been expected that I received requests from the media, a number of you, to have an interview on June 12th. And I'd accepted long before. And you had accepted long before we even learned of these honors, which were, I must say, very cleverly tied to June 12th. So we have, for the first time perhaps in this country, what I call a thematic honors list. And for me, I find nothing wrong with that. I think, in fact, it's perhaps to some extent, could even become a tradition to have a thematic honors list, so that each time we pour through the list, we can at least identify under what canopy, national canopy, creative, political, scientific, or whatever, the honors list has been compiled. Before we go into the June 12th event itself, let me remark that June 12th means several things to different people. We must begin by acknowledging that. Not so long ago, we had World Poetry Day. And I used that occasion to call attention to some inconsiderate, let's put it that way, inconsiderate demolition and that which left, anyway, a number of people homeless, communities, the Laje Otumara in particular. I received, after the appeal from them, I asked them to write out, give me a full account of that brutal evacuation. And we used it during the poetry celebration. I even contributed by adding a few verses to an old evacuation protest song, Morocco. You all remember Morocco. So this is Morocco all over again. Perhaps the first time was under military regime. Suddenly, we woke up, we were surrounded by military tanks, armored tanks, etc. Before they knew where they were, hundreds had been rendered homeless. And for me, it's unconscionable that such uncivil activities take place under Chilean. So that occasion, which in effect was, there's no poetry yet. That was the whole idea. There's no poetry yet. Yes, we can meet, recite poetry, we can celebrate poetry, nothing wrong with that. But as long as our humanity is being trampled upon in any way, we have a right to lament that the real poetry of life, the poetry of existence, is not yet with us. And so, to the people of Elijah, Umara, this has been an opportunity for them to renew their appeal. And got this letter, I was going to have it printed out and distributed with all the documentation, because it didn't just happen overnight. Negotiation. And promises which were made by I forgot the initials now, under the Ministry of Housing, responsible for this sort of negotiation. And the way they were just rendered homeless. It's not the kind of recognition that even the lowest citizen in our midst deserve. So if poetry fails, maybe June 12th will succeed. And that's why I had a renewed appeal from the Umara people. Still waiting, just waiting for the elementary necessity, roof over their heads. One thing which you may not know is that among the requests which some of us made to this regime was the reinstatement of the office of the ombudsman. And already the ombuds people and women have been appointed all over the country. This is a prime case, testing case of that institution called ombudsman. And I'll be forwarding the complaint, petition, and protest of the Otomara people to the ombudsman. And we'll wait and see if by the time we celebrate June 12th next year, it's something actually worth celebrating, shorn of the infelicity of existence surrounding us. At least, even if one corner, but serve as a model of reparation for the rest of the nation. And I don't see why we should use any state law as a effective model. It's an example to prove that development is possible without dehumanization. That really is the essence of this. So put it in your notebook. Let's see, long before the next comes around, we'll be able to boast several restorative actions taking place over this very elementary requirement of humanity, the roof over our heads. Now let's get to the interesting subject of June 12. One of the reasons why I agree to this power cycle, that's okay, thanks, is that there's still a lot of misconception. Even among those who participated. This is normal. When you have a movement by the June 12, which resolved to terminate a brutal regime, one the life which this nation had never known. People come from different directions. They have different motivations. Some join just to settle scores, believing that that's the opportunity. Others, of course, many join simply because they feel belittled, they feel reduced, they feel dehumanized by the conduct of military. Others join simply because they're against any form of dictatorship. In other words, they join for the same reason as hundreds of thousands of millions of people are rising up in the United States, all over the country. That's another June 12, another example of the June 12 sensibility and response to the intolerable. Many negative things happened during that struggle. I want it understood that we had lots of betrayal, with lots of inconsistency. We had lots of opportunistic membership conduct. We had treachery that cost many lives, that pauperized hundreds. We had retributive activity, even continuing even after this determination of that particular regime. People now assuming different roles, pretending and using the transition period. So what I'm trying to stress is that June 12 did not begin on June 12, and it did not terminate June 12. Many people, even when they want to settle scores today, political scores, maybe thwarted ambition, their myrmidons try to trivialize June 12th. Instead of just leaving June 12th alone, didn't participate, nobody tried to force you to participate, nobody reduced you, use your humanity. So if you didn't take part in June 12th, you are not concerned. Leave June 12th clearly alone. If you see anybody making false claims, absolutely, you have a right, responsibility to say, I happen to know about this. It didn't go this way, and they proved this way. That is quite legitimate. For those who invoke June 12th, who trivialize it simply because of thwarted political vision, are the real enemies. They're the worst kind of enemies of democracy. And June 12th, therefore, the spirit of June 12th must be sustained through reminders, through occasions, gatherings, stuff like this, and also through other civic activities. One, which is sprung on us, was the recognition, formal recognition, some individuals who participated in the movement, in the activity. When you find a general in a rented apartment of an exile, that general refuses to sit in a chair, sits on the floor, suddenly gets up from the chair and sits on the floor. You ask yourself, what on earth is happening? I'm narrating an event, just a little taste of what went on, not just internally, but in fact, largely outside, which a dissident general, who had in fact had to flee for his life, came to strategize, use that word, contribute. The next moment, I saw him leap up from the chair, sit on the floor. What's good? It's in Bayswater, one of our various operational going on. And suddenly realized why he did it. Realized that he was sitting near a window, lots of windows there. So he sat on the floor, so his head was not above the window sill. Just that little episode gives you a little taste of the sort of things went on during that period. It wasn't just a question of bravura activities, traipsing from city to city, mobilizing politically, national opinion, raising funds, cloak and dagger, radio, Kudirat, and so on. We affected really one of the biggest lessons in my life. I'm interested to read how the pioneers complained about the neglect of the operators. That's the important position. The sense that video really central. The little we achieved never have been achieved without radio Kudirat. We began as radio freedom, the mobile instrument, moving from place to place, ahead of detection. Then it graduated into a far more formidable instrument, equipment to cover the whole country. And finally, it settled outside in Norway, thanks to the generosity and support of the Norwegian government. And also they also, don't forget that, even some market women who carried pieces of radio, the original equipment in their goods, across the border, where they were then put together and sneaked into the country. So let me say that I absolutely agree that I miss the component in the list of honors. It's very difficult to honor an piece of equipment. This may have been the problem with those who compiled the list. Can't just put there no matter. Which to absolutely agree with Penny about the importance of that equipment. So many people participated in ensuring the acquisition and operation, the logistics of ensuring that that made an impact, including using the mobile to interview people within Nigeria and then translate it outside and then rebroadcast so that people were gathering around their video. Another miss for me personally was very difficult for people at the time. Let me use as an example the ones I call the two routes. The route of Johan, those route which. Why do I single out these people? They refuse to listen to the voice of some of their own people who said, this is not our point, this is not our fact, and who looked at them with contempt, condescension, say, why are they taking part in this? And people like Ralph, Johan, and several of them, these are the two I recall immediately, I used to refer to them as the two Ralph. Ralph, which was a diplomat who gave up vision and became a real pillar of sustenance on many levels for those who went out in the field and faced fire directly. But to be able to face fire and to be able to come back knowing that you have a square meal, drinks on the house, anytime you could walk in, Mr. Richard always there to receive you. This is a very critical role in morale, in conviction. So it's another one which I mean. There have been many, many great participants who not on a list like that. And I think we should accept the fact that it's inevitable in any struggle, so multidimensional, cut across the entire sweep of the nation, professions, call it whatever you want. The military itself, the clerical, academic, market women, factory workers, and so on. So I want you all just to see those of us who are honored as mere representatives of vast movement. That really is right. These little things. Participation. Now, one which really gladdened my heart, let's move now to mission, to recognition. I'll come to it. Some of you may remember Becker's funeral. I don't know, Becker. If you were there on that day, you might have noticed that I arrived on the back, on the pillion of a motorcycle. It was heavy. Finally, I had to abandon my vehicle, jump, and arrive at the graveyard, literally. I came from that day. I arrived, fortunately. Never have forgiven myself if I had failed on Obeko on that day. Quiet, but very, very deceptive, very committed, very brave, and very brainy. Most analytical during that struggle. And Beto, to the extent that he even was prepared to undertake what I consider a suicidal action. Let me tell you what happened. I was then in Paris. He had attended one of these pro-democracy conferences in the US, I think it was. It was the conference also attended by Olisa Dakoba and a number of others. I remember those two because they stopped by arrangement to see me in Paris. I remember the Citadine Hotel on top of the airport. That is the day on which as I've written before, I lamented the fact that I was not a multimillionaire because I wanted them to go back with all the money in the world to buy all kind of equipment which they needed because they were inside. We had left for outside. And what little I had, pathetic, felt embarrassed. And we were back up saying, this is all we have. Well, he didn't know, however, and others was a mission entrusted to Beko. He came to report back. Beko came with a very strange equipment. I'll not tell you what it was, but something which you'll never notice. It's something quite ordinary, very domestic, but very sophisticated. It fired only one bullet. So disguised. Also, it beat the security. Remember that these machines were still quite rudimentary at that time. Today, of course, you wouldn't get away with it. But he actually carried it from the States. Scanning machine. And one bullet to self-destruct. He fired it, destroyed itself. Beko, so that all he wanted was an opportunity to meet fighter. That's all. So that's really what you want. That's the Beko. You realize this is the side of mission. Yeah, Momo. Look at this man, bro. So, yeah. I want to tell people that trivialize sacrifice very carefully. Because the message waiting. People, anyway, I took it from him, kept it in mind, because in my home in Upland, one day I said, enough of this thing. I was going to keep it as a kind of souvenir of the struggle. I took it from him. I said, Beck, I see you with this kind of weapon again. I will use it against you. I will take care of you myself. Went home. I also tried to persuade him to stay out because I knew the hunter would come. They were after his head, and sure enough, shortly after he came back. So those are just some vignettes. It was changed the lives of many people. Hopefully for the better, but unfortunately in many cases. What else can I use as an example? Yeah, I think that those are enough. Question. Save the lives of a number of Nigerian youth because Abacha's goons passed around false news Wole Soyinka was recruiting and was training people in that area, and they should report. That's an example of where Radio Kudirat was used. Because of Radio Kudirat, we're able to counter that false information and save those youths from real agony. For some people, some of the students especially, were already moving to that particular day. They're able to use that. But it is again somebody from the military who warned us that it was a fault, that this was being propagated. We didn't know. Our own, well, yes, we had scouts all over the country following activities. They were the ones who discovered, for instance, the killer squad based in Abuja. And that's when I approached the former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, to see if he could use his, his cloud to help us expose that killer squad in Abuja and neutralize their effectiveness some way or the other. Not going forward with it. So yes, we did have units all over the country. And as I narrated in my set for that dawn, the group was supposed to even come back from without, inside, supposed to come through the south. All this. If you want to know more details, go and ask General Akinriade.
Thank you very much, Prof. And like you mentioned, June 12 means so many things, different things to so many people. The pains of Nigerians, which require some kind of healing, is numerous. One is June 12, and those whose lives were disrupted by the struggle. Those who left their families, who were on exile, those who died in the cause and all that. The Civil War is another pain that requires some kind of healing. I'd like to know, Prof, how do we heal? It looks to me like from 2018, there seems to be a gradual gravitation into realization of how we can move forward in realizing June 12 and its essence in our nationhood. Those kind of pains in our nationhood, how do we heal generally? That's my first question, sir. My second question is IBB's account on what happened to the election and the aftermath. And he explained in his book what he did and what he did not. Put the blame to some people. I'd like to know what your views are about that on a day like this. My third question, sir. Well, you've said a lot of things that have that is evoking a bit of a few questions. I just have four actually in the media. There are unresolved killings around June 12. The likes of Kudirat Abiola lost their lives. Do you think, for example, maybe the government of the day should revisit and because some people are still pained. There are a few things, details that are not being revealed. Maybe the revelation of those things could bring a succors of some sort and some kind of healing to those families and people who are connected. And my last question, Prof. I'm very sure that those who, when they were putting together the names of the honorees, they might be skeptical about putting your name there because you had rejected national honors before. You said this is thematic, and you somewhat give a thumbs up for this. How is this different from the ones that you have rejected in the past? Thank you, sir.
All right. You will have permission to ask another question later if I miss out, which I'm sure I will.
Okay, sir.
Let's all begin by accepting the fact that when you engage in activities like this, there will always be casualties. People should always understand that inevitably there will be casualties. It's the responsibility of the community or the society to compensate in some way or the other, not necessarily material, just even sometimes recognition, assistance here and there, to accept that responsibility. So it's a two-way thing. On the one hand, participants do not expect anything. They should know that there will be casualties, there will be losses. In many cases, there will be no reward of any sort. In most cases, right, across the board. There's no reason, however, why those who participated cannot actually initiate programs for those casualties within their reach. And maybe if you have a kind of ritual gathering from time to time of those who are involved, one way or the other, including not even directly, but indirectly, in which they reminisce. These ways we will discover more and more people who are in need and who are entitled to a kind of restitutional assistance from the rest of the community. For many people, healing takes a while. For others, total healing never happens. Let me narrate one instance, which may be capture the spirit of this. One young man, he ended up working for Osun State government, the special advisor, I remember. And we had at the media club, Yagon, Ibadan, one of the early hearings, post-Abacha regiment. And I recall this young man narrated how he was tortured. The government at the time was looking desperately for where the radio was. Oh, there's some amusing tales about that radio, by the way. Sometimes one gets too solemn about these things. But remind me, I'll tell you one. And so he was taken in, was tortured, he refused to break. So they brought his parents to him in the cell, and they then threatened to subject his parents to the same experience. So this young man, I wish I could remember his name, he happened to be somewhat proficient in the martial arts. So he pounced on the police man who was a police torture. It wasn't military torture, this was police torture. And disarmed him. Found that he had a holster. Pulled the gun out, put the bullet to his head, and put the muzzle, I beg your pardon, to his head, and pulled the trigger. So he prepared to die rather than see his parents. Now, how do you heal people like that? I mean, how can you compensate that family for that trauma, that moment trauma that he didn't know, of course, that the guns were never loaded when they are dealing with. So he thought that it was loaded. He just wanted to blow out his brain. Rather, this sort of thing was commonplace. How do you deal with it? How do you cope with it? Not but something, and usually is to minimize the hurt and to enable them to find their own peace within the community. There are many ways, many programs in other societies which actually are dedicated towards this kind of and this is what this kind of condition. This is what we had hoped would come out of some of those hearings, whether whether it's a kind of hearing at the media house, Yagon, or whatever. There should be a kind of progression so that we feel eventually that this society is a little bit healthier than it was at the beginning of some story. I can't remember the others.
The IBB's account of June 12th.
The account.
IBB's account of the June 12th. Babangida's account of June 12th.
Oh, June 12th.
Babangida, yes, his account.
Oh, Babangida's.
In his book.
Well, let me tell you what I told him. I called him. And I said, your memoir is not yet finished. And I said, isn't it about time we name names in this matter? Babangida's book should be read side by side with Omorui. Omorui was there. That way, everybody can judge how credible one version is rather than the other. I happen to know, also in addition to Omorui's book, we did meet when he went into exile. I know that one moment which I want us all to see is an absolutely fact because it's corroborated in many instances. Was that Babangida was a general without an army. That's the tragic moment. Because he was there. Whatever he wanted to do inside, we don't know. But we know also certain moves which he made. We know those who visited him at the time, those who added their weight to the annulment, both within the military and within the civil. We know the royal fathers who went to see him, said, oh no, how were they going to accept the implementation of the result of that election? We know all of those, but it's not me who should write it. It's he who owes it to the nation, who owes it to the nation. And so I told him, I said, you're going to write another book. You haven't finished your memoir. That's my position vis-a-vis him.
All right, sir. The other question is some of the unresolved killings.
Some of
the unresolved killings around June 12th, yes. Like that of Kudirat Abiola.
Yes.
How does the government of the need to revisit them, to investigate and probably lay them to rest finally?
Again, it's one of these losses, immeasurable. That's one brave woman. Molded became in the mold of, when I remember, I think of the Aba women's riot against the colonial forces, when they came out with pestles and stones, mortars, and fought the British colonial power. She was cut in that mold. There's no way you can actually compensate for that kind of loss. Again, one of the casualties. People like me write poems about such heroines. We have quite a few of them. And teach our school children, make sure that we never again pass through a phase where leaders in the country decide to annul history. Remember what I'm talking about, when history was actually abolished? Stop teaching history in not just tertiary institutions, but even secondary schools, by order of the military. And we didn't know about it. Nobody, we're busy doing other things. I think it was Fashola who first alerted us, Governor Fashola, the fact that history had stopped. An order from above. He himself couldn't believe it when he found it. But that's certainly the opposite way of commemorating, recognizing, and evaluating people like make sure that they are recognized, they are taught as part of this thing. And they're the ones whom we have to thank.
I think
Whatever.
Cheung's questions has to do with closure, investigating the killings.
Yeah.
Time and time again, we have been betrayed. Okay, when Buhari came, he said he was going to order an investigation into all the unusual deaths, let's just put it this way, both within the military and the civilian. And we reminded him, when he was, where are the files? He said all these files, we dusted up, and where are the files? Let us see the result. I'm very glad that you raised this aspect. So it's a challenge also to the present government. Fulfill the pledges which were made by your delinquent predecessors. Pick up those files, dust them out. This is a very good question. It's part and parcel of the responsibilities of government. Let us know what really happened. Till tomorrow, we don't know factually who killed Dele Giwa. We do not know who killed the Bola Ige, but there are clues. Those clues exist. Let me tell you something which happened now that we're reminiscing. During that period of Bola Ige, many things go on which are not publicized. We began our own pursuit of truth. And I recall a group of us went to the American embassy. We learned that the Americans had offered help, their own detectives, their own methods of detection. And so we visited the American embassy to ensure that our government was made to accept help from what we needed help from wherever it came. The Attorney General of Justice is murdered in his bedroom on his way to take up a United Nations post. Oh, heaven and earth should be turned upside down until you get to the bottom of that country. So we went there and we said, don't listen to this government. If they say anything like territorial integrity and anybody people just can come and interfere in Nigeria. I said, please don't accept. Whatever help you want offered, make sure it is accepted. If it's not, we will raise a huge cry over here. From that embassy, I picked up the phone also, called the president. Said, we're here, the embassy. We learned help is being offered. We want to make sure that it's accepted for whatever it's worth, from wherever it comes. I remember he called up Tafa. Tafa was then the Inspector General.
Tafa Balogun.
Tafa Balogun. You know, that called Tafa Balogun. Tafa, some people are here, or at least they are the embassy. So these people, anyway, we had the usual telephone conversation back and forth. And we also pursued other clues, right? But thank you very much for raising that. Yes, let us enter the challenge of Tinubu. Bring up those files, dust them out, pursue those clues, reinvestigate, call back witnesses. There are many of us who have lots of clues to offer from our own modest investigation. They're all over the world. Find out those who deliberately polluted the line of clues that would have led us to certain answers. Thanks a lot for that question.
Yes, sir.
there any other one?
The final one was about your past honors that you've rejected. You said this one is thematic, and you gave it a thumbs up.
Which one did I reject? I can't remember.
There was the one on the Jonathan.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Jonathan.
Oh, the original one. No, no, no. I did not reject it. I was ambushed. I had no option. I accepted it. Remember, it was presented to me at the airport.
Oh.
You know, my colleagues were there, welcomed me after the Nobel. I had to accept it. However, this is one of the uses of this honor. There's one day when you can throw it back, you can use it as a weapon and say, I no longer want your honor. And this is what happened on this occasion. We were marching from the labor headquarters in Surulere to Balewa Square. And we marched all the way. We got to Balewa Square. And we found it had been locked against, or rather barricaded by the military and the police. And I was outraged. And somehow I had a fear that the march would be prevented. And so I brought along my Nigerian CO, what was it at the time? CO, yeah, CO. Anyway, one of the other ones. And so, CFR. Okay, thanks. And so I was able to use it. I took it out, threw it on the ground, and spat on it. And as I said at the time, BBC said, there was something else I wanted to do to it, but I didn't want to be accused of indecent exposure, so I limited myself. Those much. Somebody picked it up later on, returned it to me. Now, what shall I do with it? I think I will add it to Becker's posthumously. Give it to his family.
I just want to, okay, my name is Jonathan James Lianga. Looking at the population of Nigeria, over half wasn't born as at June 12, 1993. So sometimes these conversations could be mistaken to be conversation of these old people and their adventures and misadventures as the case may be. Why should June 12 be important at this point to a nation that has a majority of people who haven't the faintest idea in terms of it happening real time? Especially in a country where we have seen events like us, developments like the Civil War, that ordinarily we thought would go away. And each time seems to take on a new life of its own that has now narratives and perspectives that seem as if it just happened. So what are the lessons from that, and why should June 12 really be important to a young Nigerian today?
The first thing is that they used to learn to shut their mouth if they're ignorant. When they don't know, they have a choice. Shut up. Don't talk about it. Second, be curious. Make an inquiry, do your research. What happened at this time? What happened to this person? Why did this happen? And also have that choice. If they don't want to do either, then they become enemies history, enemies truth. That's one aspect. However, in addition, society has a responsibility to make sure they have access to material, to the truth, which is why I keep iterating that try crime against youth, against education, against knowledge, which was committed by the government at the time in eliminating history from the history. Parties also have a responsibility to use this material so that even if it's not fiction, but at least it's there. People watch films, they get interested. One of the reasons why I've been able to reconcile myself to bios like and I have to console myself because I hate social. I don't like to see myself. But it takes a lot of work for me to write biography. Most of the work. I'm a So when they call me, come and watch the premiere, I take on demand. But later on, I did watch it. I watched it just by myself. But I had to admit after watching it, performs a function. That those of us who are in the variety just have to pay the penalty for being notorious. Something difficult. I understand the fact that one of the film companies didn't become interested in narrating this period from the point of view of Radio Kudirat. They want to tell the story. Which is a very good idea. At least we'll depersonalize it a bit more, make it more congenial to people like me. Now you're telling history, you're narrating history from a more or less objective, neutral point of view. What happened to Radio Kudirat? Who? And then ancillary events, really not total fiction. I mean, not total narrative. Part of it, I'm sure, the fiction, of course, known as creative liberty, but at least the core of it is there. So the youth will be enabled to understand what went on. And to go back to what I said before, we didn't, let's say, in the fight for independence, we didn't just dismiss the past. We were curious. Well, what happened even during British, when before independence? What happened at the very beginning of that misadventure called European Western imperialism and colonialism? We were curious. Youth have a responsibility to be curious. Often they think, no, they can just open their mouth and laugh about anything and dismiss everything. Irresponsibility. We were not irresponsible. Curious.
There's a few more questions. I will ask this question. I don't know how you feel about it. Those were the University of Ibadan, then I was young, very years ago. We fought, but the election was called to they are not. Fought, the election was called they are not. People are saying then, no, it's not necessary. Why were those who fought? Why did they shy away from participating in the transition program to get power and change society in 1999?
Why did they not participate? I can answer that question. Why did they shy away?
Yes, many of them, when they had the opportunity and they have people behind them, why did they not participate in the transition program, get power, and then change society from
Why
1999?
did they not participate in what?
Those who were part of the
Transition program.
Transition program.
Oh, transition.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I certainly did not. I was not interested. I wanted to go back to my writing. I wanted to go back to where I belong. I'm not a politician. I have confessed, however, that 36 hours, yeah, for 36 hours, I did decide that we had a responsibility. I nearly accepted nomination to run for office. After 36 hours, I said, Wole Soyinka, the great.
Was that for president, sir?
So let me go back to what I love doing.
Yeah, Prof. Now about curiosity and current affairs. Last time you went to see Bola Tinubu, assessing a highway that was not completed. Yeah, he said because there's soccer for roads. So, do you have anything to tell Nigerians as to how you assess the government after 2 years? How do you assess the regime?
First thing I have to tell you is creativity is my native. I visited Africa on the invitation of Abiola. I was actually, it was a conference in the Benin, Masala, and that is different. And Abiola I'm inviting you to come to Africa to see the strides we have made. Come anytime you want. I leave them from myself. And I went there to see what he was creating. He said, my ambition when I took office was to remove that stigma of houseboy and housemaid from Africa. Then after I came to remember, he came to talk, he was also crying. He said, no, build the school, building this, building that. So I've always been like, do something, want to post about it, invite me to come and see, I can come along. After that, I would do, at least have an obligation to go see what you say to them. I must tell you, I was impressed. Impressed, thankful, impressed. New urban they were already building on the other side housing. Not what I'm talking about housing, not just the road. I was impressed by that. But to go back to the yes, I did say I would give, which is the truth. I would give, unless there's something absolutely I was first started to take your hand over what you're let's see what where you are headed. It doesn't mean at the end of that year, let's say, okay, well, my alarm clock has gone off. You can and I will. It just means that I'm now free. So I will not give I can only tell you that one, remember I also said that I gave him 7 points and revere. By that I meant my personal agenda. I don't dictate government. Just say, look at it like the areas I know. Ombudsman, which are president, that is one of the items. Very happy. But also it must be empowered. No point creating things just for the day. It must be empowered. It must have an authority, it must have some power, it must be able to come to the rest of this stress, individuals and community. selfish demand. Let me put it that way. Selfish demand. Because kind of petitions, the kind of appeals used to come to me. They say to them now, listen, I have stated in the location of ombudsman, go to them. Then if they fail you, come back and then we will get it.
All right. I think it's afternoon now. Good afternoon. All right. I'd like to touch on two themes that you brought up when you spoke. The first was you spoke about a wish for development that isn't dehumanizing. I know that was in the context of the story you were sharing, but on a broader scale, when you look at development currently, it seems that it is hugely dehumanizing in Nigeria. Some of the reform we're seeing that is supposed to bring about prosperity is plunging people into deeper poverty. We are seeing more children out of school, more children malnutrition. The list goes on and on and on. My question to you is, do you feel that the current administration has a genuine commitment to development without dehumanization? Without dehumanization. That's number one. Number two, you also spoke about those who are trivializing June 12th and the movement. And that struck a chord because if you look at Africa, the rest of Africa, the parallel I draw, as much as in Nigeria it's more about the movement for democracy, when you look at the rest of Africa, it's more about the liberation movements. Those parties who fought for independence about 30 or so years ago that have gradually over time evolved from being liberators to oppressors. They have become tyrannical in their nature, authoritarian over time. Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Namibia to a large extent, Uganda. These are all people who liberated their people in a quest for democracy for their people and over time became oppressors. My question to you is, the trajectory seems to be following a similar pattern here in Nigeria, where we are seeing a liberator backsliding on the ideals of democracy. How do you assess how far we've come from June 12, 1993, to where we are today, where there's one state that is not under democratic rule? There's question marks around freedom of speech. People are being arrested left, right, and center, although quietly. A number of things that we can list. Have we really moved forward and deepened our democracy since June 12, 1993?
First of all, yes, I think development is not only possible, but it's imperative development of not dehumanized. It is feasible. If you say you are creating something for human beings and you have no choice. You have no choice but to admit that. You say you are creating a housing estate. Who's going to inhabit it? Rodents? No, it's human beings. So the ultimate beneficiary is humanity. Why should we develop in a way which dehumanizes? It doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction in terms. That is why before any physical development is done, which affects officials find out, for instance, who will be displaced. They check, have they a right to be there in the first place? If not, it's a different approach from if they legitimately are staying, legitimately occupy that position. But even so, even if they were staying there, occupying that space illegitimately, there's a way of evacuating them, of making them leave, which need not dehumanize. There's no reason why even alternative makeshift habitation cannot be erected. It's done elsewhere. Even farming projects, even during farming, you want mechanized farming. You want to grow, you want to make sure the people have food security. Well, that's a laudable and essential kind of activity for any government. But then, in the process of doing that, you have to treat those who were there humanely, treat them intelligently. You call them together and say, listen, this is the project. This is what it will benefit everyone. We have to move you. Let us see how we can arrange for you to be in a humane way. If then they become stubborn, they refuse to see reason, then maybe other forms of action have to be taken. It's a question of gradation. We cannot say that people will not be inconvenienced, but there's a huge difference between a brutal evacuation. People just wake up and find that the caterpillar is rolling over them. What kind of, development is that? No. So it's complex. I don't pretend that nobody will lose anything in the process of development. It's impractical. People have to move sometimes. You have to give up something, but the government has the responsibility to try and compensate in some way. Now, your second question is a very large.
Sorry, sir, if you would just allow me to elaborate. So, the context was, do you feel President Tinubu's economic reforms are being done in a humane way?
Oh, absolutely.
The economic reforms.
And it's possible. It's possible. Anybody who says they have a problem of development, which have a program of development, and they must dehumanize, and they can't find a way not to dehumanize, let them come and talk to me. I will advise them how to go about it. I volunteer, and if I don't know how, I will ask. I will ask other people how they've done it. I volunteer them. Because governments very often, they have a habit of saying, what's wrong with people? Are you against development? Against development? As if development is an abstraction. It's not an abstraction. It's material, it's concrete, it's also spiritual, in many cases. So let's treat it as a problematic, not as an impossibility. The second one, sometimes one gets to a point where you feel that maybe there is a slave gene embedded in certain sections of humanity. In other words, that some people, some kinds of people, some breed of people feel happier being enslaved. Otherwise, how explain the spread of the state of military dictatorship just spreading across the West African sub-region to the acclaim of people? I explained the fact that when we had this political tip here, nearly 2 years ago, the first movement of some sections of people go to the military headquarters, inviting them to come again, run this nation, no matter what the problem is. How do you explain what is happening in the United States? How do you explain that? This man said, I will do this when I get there. Some of us said, watch. And we will not only do it, we'll go further. And yet, the American people voted and put that same man back in power. To explain it. If you have an answer, tell me. I have written tomes, talk this of power and freedom, in which I have reduced our own way history to a permanent tussle between power and freedom, with a basic belief that in all human beings, there is a will to freedom. There is a rejection of tyranny in any form as the basis on which I view the rest of the world. But it looks as if I'm wrong. And I'm never afraid to accept that I'm wrong. At 90, pushing 91 tomorrow, I'm willing to admit that maybe I've been wrong all my life, and that maybe it could the best section of humanity really, that their freedom is in enslavement. Otherwise, I cannot explain what's going on now. All I know is I've contracted. My autonomous republic of Vijayba, come and try and enslave me there and see what happens to your head. I agree with you before you agree with you. June 12 back and June 12 forward. Yeah, I know.
Thank you for giving us kind of business about the UK. When the first announcement was made years ago, the remark was that there was a kind of a list, a very long list of people, heroes of Israel that are ignored. From since Thursday, same message, like the same narrative being said again. What is your message? And then you have told us that most of you that are recognized are just mere representation of the entire movement. But I want to ask, what is your advice or message? Certainly, the list is long, and then it's inexhaustible. But what is your message to them that they should not feel aggrieved? Like you mentioned right now. What's the message that this recognition is continuing, and then it's not a kind of project that will be exhausted in one person. What's your message to them? Other people who body committed this struggle, but they are yet to recognize.
Celebration, did I hear the word celebration? You are. I feel, oh, okay. Okay. Well, I can only say if you want to share my own, we can meet and decide how we work about it. I will wear it for 3 months. I will pass it on to an aggrieved person for the next 1 month or 2 months to pass it. We can share. Unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, these are what they don't come with geographication. They're a party. I'm not even aware. I think they just hang things around our necks, if I remember from the other one, CFR. So, but in all seriousness, I have no real concrete answer. All I know is there are all forms of rewards. There's inner satisfaction, which is able to say to hell with external award, and there's evidence sometimes of an achievement. In other words, tactile, in which you can see that, okay, I work towards this. I work towards democracy, and I can see that democracy being manifested this way and that way, and you take satisfaction from that. Otherwise, it's a problem, when it comes to recognition. It's a real problem, very nebulous. That's why I prefer to use the expressions like symbolic recognition, and to say to the aggrieved, whatever, just take it that they've just picked on some sufferheads to represent the rest of the sufferers, and that it's a collective endeavor. And that when you see somebody walk around with a medal around their neck, say, I am part of that. There's an invisible one. That's all I can answer. It's a very difficult question. I don't believe in violence anyway to begin with. So you're asking the wrong person.
Finally, yes, so the last question.
You mentioned earlier that some people about history, like I can read about history, like something about history. But for someone that have been into research for 5, 6 months, I understand that our national library is not functioning. We can't get access to history there. We don't know or have access to materials to get our history. And speaking of things, the short period I'm doing research, I figure out that most of the newspaper outlets that are available at the library, they do not have any publication. They are all missing. The Punch, PM News. I was asking, is there any of this I couldn't get any materials to use? So how do we know people? How do we tell our history? How do we know our history? Because I understand about Babangida school. I know for sure that the man is not writing because he will never write a book and put himself as a bad person. So how do we know the truth? I am craving to know the truth. I want to know what happened. I want to know the true heroes of the truth. But these materials are not accessible. You can't get there. They are not in the national library. And if there's a way you can use your voice to help us bring back history to curriculum, the secondary school and the primary school, the basic education, that really go a long way. How do we know the truth? How do we know our history? We can't access them anyway. They are not at the library. You can't get anything anywhere.
No information at the library, no newspapers.
You know, you have to be interested to begin with. We spoke about, I referred to Omoruyi's book, for instance. Sorry, how do you pronounce it? Omoruyi. There's one. If you Google titles or events, you can easily find titles, narratives relating to that link word, that search word. You'd be surprised the amount of material we get. If you go to YouTube, for instance, you will see documentaries on so many aspects of leadership on the African continent. Some have been made even by former soldiers. Ghana, for instance, there's a lot of material on the coup, post-Nkrumah military coups and so on. Come to Nigeria, you see documentaries on Ojukwu, the Civil War, Murtala Mohammed. The world today is awash with information, over and beyond anything available to us in our own time. Today, literally, you can Google, find out who sneezed at a certain meeting or who fell asleep if you go into you. And these things are free. So the exposure to knowledge, information, is literally explosive today. And it's a question of interest or no interest. Even school children.
She's saying that there are no newspapers in libraries. You can't find even a newspaper library. Newspapers of June 12th, they are not missing.
Oh, well, I don't know how we're going to. I don't know how we're going to get over gullibility. You're talking. I know there's competition. There's real material, truthful material, solid material. Then there is fake news. Fake news. I've said it over and again. I'm bored stiff, and each time I mention it, people say, "Oh yes, it's because you are now being criticized." And so, who are you? Who do you think you are for your criticism? I'm talking about a phenomenon which is a danger to culture, to civilization, to history, to knowledge, to even intelligence. The development of fake news, especially from this country, as an industry on its own, to wake up one day and find an obituary notice planted on internet. What does that do? Not to the person who, about whom the obituary is being written, if he or she cares, the worse for them. But what does it do to their relation? What does it do to somebody who's on the other end of the world and reads the sudden death of somebody 4,000 miles? What does it do? How is the psyche affected when you see a version of something you participated in, a version being given, which is a total travesty? So there is competition. And unfortunately, the dilemma is not being handled as intelligently as it should be. Not enough to go to the House Assembly and pass law. There's re-education process, which is why the ability to identify legitimate media from the crooks, from the sick, the diseased in minds, who wake up and say, who can I torture today by fake news? There's a responsibility, a collective and holistic approach, punishment as well as re-education. It's a serious issue. As you know, the king of fake news has ascended the throne in a country like the United States. King of fake news. So it's a serious issue. And when we raise it, people should confront it and not try to brush it aside as immaterial. It's collective work.
Thank you very much.
It's the way you present it also. That's very important. Somebody can wake up one day and find that the same word has been used in a deleterious way. I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay, so thank you very much. Your question was not answered. Just let us know.
I said, excuse me.
No.
I said, if it's possible, if you can use this voice history history study.
Advocacy. He's back actually. He's been returned. He's actually returned. History is back. History is back. He's actually back. He's been returned. Policy. Yeah, you know you have to take about 2-3 years officially. Yeah.
The ramifications of all the questions you've asked today will go on forever and ever and ever. Till the next time, till the next June 12. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's about it. So thank you for spending your remaining day conversing. Thank you.
Thank you.